Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another hour of Health Conclusions, where we try to give our listeners important information on nutrition, exercise, and holistic alternative and integrative medicine. Please take a minute to visit our website at www.healthyconclusions.com and like us on Facebook. My name is Bob Nugabar, and I will be your host for this evening's show. Tonight's show is being brought to you by Altrua Health Share, which has been serving its members and their families with their health care needs since 1997. Please take a moment to visit their website at altruahealthshare.org or call 888-244-3839 to see just what Altrua Health Share can offer your family for their health care needs. It might mean substantial savings to you. Tonight we're going to talk about something special that pertains to the current illness I am currently dealing with, and we're trying to cure it with nutrition. We have brought back Jennifer Whitney, who is a specialist in gut and psychology syndrome, better known as the GAP Nutritional Protocol. We also have a special guest, John Knutson, who happens to be a GAP's chef and makes all of the important broths for Jennifer's clients, along with other local naturopathic clients. We are going to give you some important insights into how to repair a leaky gut, so be prepared to take some notes. So let's get started here. If we look closely at the GAP diet, it has a broad spectrum of uses for many different ailments, everything from learning disabilities to mental disorders to autoimmune diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis. So can you explain why the GAP diet is so important for treating so many different modalities?
Yeah, it works with healing the gut, and about 90% of the immune system is in the gut, and the gut works a lot with everything also going on in the brain, so the neurological system, the gastrointestinal system. And so when we work on healing the gut, then that addresses multiple different types of conditions that someone can be dealing with.
So have you dealt with people who have had a lot of these other modalities like rheumatoid arthritis or multiple sclerosis?
I have, yeah. I've worked with a wide variety of symptoms and issues and conditions, from ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, MS, bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, autism. I mean, things that you wouldn't normally consider that they're related to the gut, they are. I mean, the gut is basically the root of a tree, and all these different symptoms and conditions are like the branches. And so when you go to the core, then it can just naturally start to help all these different conditions, start to get better.
Well, you obviously must be successful with what you're doing, or you sure wouldn't be doing this. So can you tell us about some of your successes? I mean, some people that you have dealt with, how long does it normally take to get somebody, first of all, into the diet, which I know right now is pretty difficult because I've been doing some of it, and then keeping them on it for a lengthy period of time so they can actually heal the gut?
Right. I mean, those are really good questions, and people do when they come in to me, if they've researched the GAPS diet, which stands for gut and psychology syndrome, if they've researched it on their own online, they usually come in and they're pretty intimidated. Sometimes they are like, I can't do this, and they have, things like that. But when you're properly guided, I mean, the GAPS is a program that you need a proper guide because it is very detailed. There's a lot involved with it. Then it's not as hard as it appears. And so when they come in, say I have a client, she came into me and she had ulcerative colitis. She was going to the bathroom 6 or more times a day. She was pregnant, about 2 months pregnant. And she could eat, I think it was 4 foods at the most. And I really honestly was not sure if I was going to take her on, but she begged me because she just didn't have any other choice. She tried everything. So we guided her through. And it took about 4 to 5 months where we strategically guided her through their 6 stages, so stages 1 through 5. And within a couple of weeks, she was not having any more diarrhea. A lot of these food allergies and different symptoms that she was having had gone away. And when people start to have results like that, they're motivated, even if it is a really intense protocol, when they start to get alleviation from symptoms that can be crippling. I mean, if someone has diarrhea multiple times a day, they don't really want to go run errands. They don't want to book a trip. They don't want to do things that they may not be close to a bathroom, or these are crippling conditions that a lot of people come in with, and it can totally change their life. And so there's another case that I have where, the lady's same, she had major ulcerative colitis and was going to the bathroom multiple times a day. And honestly, she was one of the cases that John started to deliver to. And once we got her on his food, we got her on the GAPS diet. Within the first week, she did not have that anymore. She didn't have diarrhea anymore. And she's still, this is 8 weeks out, is completely stabilized. And she just told me last week when I met with her, I just booked a trip to Arizona, but I booked it just for a couple of days because I didn't know if I was going to be able to access what I needed to take care of myself. But now I'm more stable, so I wish I would have booked it a lot longer. So there's so many different cases. I work with autism. I work with a little boy that has a lot of different, he's not able to focus in school. He has all types of autistic symptoms. And since we've been getting him on the GAPS, he's able to focus better. He's starting to be able to do his own homework. There's just some really neat, what I consider miracles that start to happen on this protocol.
So you've got a lot of patients, I would imagine, that can't be handled by ordinary doctors because they really don't know what they're doing when it comes to something like this. And I personally don't know any allopathic doctors who use this type of a method. Now, there may be one or two out there because some of them are changing their ways. But how do you select your clients? How do you determine who you're going to help and who you just can't help?
Well, I would say I've been in practice for almost 7 years. I've been running the GAPS for almost 5. And in that time frame, I don't think I've ever turned anyone away. If they come to me and they really want this, I will make it work for them. It's more that they defeat themselves. They quit or they don't want to do it. It's not me. I really, truly want to help people. So I can either put them on the full GAPS where we follow it strategically, or I can modify it and we'll compromise where they might just follow a really clean diet and then incorporate in some of these key gut strengthening foods. And once we I basically meet them where they're at and we kind of create a win-win. There's not very many people that I've turned away because usually, they're pretty happy and we kind of figure out how to make it work for them.
So, John, we brought you in here today. How did you and Jennifer form this alliance, which seems to be so important to have somebody like you to rely on when it comes to the dietary components necessary to heal the gut?
Well, I could say that probably I was one of Jen's first clients because I was put on the GAPS, and that's kind of how I got into what I do now. I was so bad that I couldn't even intake anything, healthy or not, without either vomiting or being very diuretic. And so I did the GAPS and healed tremendously and was so impressed by it that at the time I was studying to be a naturopath, and I had a lot of epiphanies, and I realized that we need to make food the medicine. It's what we put in our body every day. And it's what can heal us. And I was so impressed with the GAPS approach that I went and became a GAPS practitioner. And then I realized that there needed to be a very supportive side because, like you said, it's difficult. You come in, you get handed, when you go into a doctor or a practitioner, you get handed sheets and foods you can eat, and it can be very overwhelming.
Well, you may get sheets. I got a whole book.
Yeah, you get books too. And so I knew that you can be very overwhelmed. And I realized that if I cooked the first few stages, that would allow Jennifer to work with them. And it's kind of like putting a person in timeout. You're removing them from their food supply. And by removing them from their food supply and taking on the healing medicine food, they start to heal. And so it's giving your body a break, and it's something that most Americans don't do.
So you actually got into this because you knew this was the way to go. This was a healing process because you've been through it yourself.
Yes.
But how did you get into this specialized cooking of these broths? I don't know many people who do this kind of work. I know a lot of people in the restaurant business, but not this. And I cooked the broth last night. It took me 3 hours. And it's a lot of chopping, it's a lot of work, and then it's a lot of pot watching.
Yes.
But do you do this in your own kitchen, or do you have a place, a commercialized kitchen where you do this?
Yeah, I have a place in Meridian. that I rent part-time, and I go in and do big cook-ups, cooking stocks, broths, and tonics. That's the stage 1 of the gut and psychology syndrome, or GAPS. And how I got into it was I was actually trained by a therapeutic chef. She was a vegan chef for 20 years and then was in a yoga pose and broke her hip and had many epiphanies, and then trained in the GAPS, and is actually an honorary board member of the Weston A. Price Foundation, if anyone knows about that foundation. But they've done studies for over 100 years with food.
We're going to have to take a quick break now. We will be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Health Conclusions, brought to you by Altrua Health Share, with your host Bob Neugebauer on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Health Conclusions on 580 KIDO AM, 107.5 FM. We're speaking with Jennifer Whitney and John Knutson about leaky gut and the GAPS diet, sponsored by AltruaHealthShare.org. All right, so we were talking to you, John, about how you got into this and what you're doing. And you just told me you were up all night cooking. So do you do this on a regular basis? Do you stay up all night cooking?
Yeah, it's kind of like fireman mentality. Once you go in, it's a marathon, and I'm cooking for a lot of people, weekly packages.
Can I get you over to my house for Thanksgiving?
Sure. You can come with me to Arizona.
All right. So you do a lot of cooking. You have a lot of clients.
Yes. I basically, I'm partnered with practitioners.
Right.
And we kind of all work like a team. Jen, me, and the practitioners that work with Jen. And basically, then I get referred their patients, and I put them on basic protocols, kind of like training wheels, so they can get their feet on the ground and start learning how to cook, and and heal at the same time, get better to where they want to cook, where they want to invest in their health, because a lot of people are so sick they're not even functioning.
So without you, they might fail on this whole process.
I mean,
unless they learn how to cook.
Yeah, unless you learn how to cook. And I went through this experience. I had to learn how to cook.
Right.
I identify with anyone that's going through the GAPS, because I've been through it myself. And to get back to your previous question, so I was trained by a chef who's been a chef for over 30 years, and they've taught me therapeutically how to take the anti-nutrients out of food. Phylic acid, oligosaccharides, all these things. Every vegetable has something that actually works against your body, because they're trying to protect themselves, the vegetable, believe it or not. So you take that out, and it makes it more bioavailable to our digestive systems. And, the whole idea of stage 1 is you're calming the inflammation, and you're trying to bring back that gut integrity by healing and sealing the gut lining that's caused leaky gut in the first place, which leads to what are we up to now? Over 500 autoimmune disorder diagnoses.
Yeah, quite a bit. Well, I'm going to have you over my house to show me how to get those little bugs out of those carrots, because I haven't been able to do that yet. They say the digestive system holds the roots of our health. So if it's not healthy, the rest of our body cannot be healthy. So is it appropriate to say that the treatment of any chronic disease has to start from the gut, and that what you guys are doing is the first stage?
I would say yes, absolutely, for sure, because I get clients that are sent in to me on a weekly basis, and they've worked with multiple doctors, they've done multiple cleanses, they've taken multiple supplements, they've done everything but actually strengthen the digestive system, and they're sicker than ever. So really the first place to start is with strengthening the gut. And if you actually start there, you may not need to go through all those different types of cleanses and IVs and all these different things that, you may not need all that.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense. So you're telling me that you get a lot of clients that they come from other doctors that they just haven't been able to help them?
I do. I get a huge amount of people that come in, and by the time they come in, their digestive system is basically sterilized, because they've been put on all these, whether it's Western or natural antibacterial, herbs, antifungal herbs, cleanses, I mean, everything but strengthening the digestive system through food. I mean, they're usually put on all that, but then they're not really coached on the nutrition. I mean, they may have been put on the FODMAP diet, the ketogenic diet, the autoimmune paleo diet, but those diets don't address what the GAPS does, which is those key foods that build and strengthen your digestive system. And then your immunity starts to work better. And all these overgrowths of bacteria, maybe parasite infections, fungal infections, they start to get naturally corrected, by the body itself.
Well, I was kind of amazed when I took a look at the diet you gave me of how many fats are included in there, along with the bone broth. And it really is, I guess most doctors would consider that an unhealthy diet in some ways. Because for so long they have been saying don't eat saturated fats because of the cholesterol problem or what it'll do to your blood. And I have never believed that. For years, my grandma and grandpa, they lived until their hundreds. And believe me, they ate a lot of fat. So it kind of makes me think of that everything that they've been telling us is really the reverse. Mm-hmm. And what we've been doing to our bodies, feeding them with grains instead of the natural foods that we would normally get if we were out there on a farm, seem to make the difference. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not really the fat, it's what kind of fat, right? There's a huge difference there. Fat is not all in the same category.
Well, it's not like the processed oils we eat.
Right, yeah. Once we hit the Industrial Revolution and things started to be processed, then you started to get refined coconut oil, vegetable oils, canola, soy, all these different types of refined hydrogenated oils and fats, and those are actually bad for you. But if you have the good fats, like raw butter or organic, grass-fed butter from grass-fed cows and traditional lard, duck fat, good quality, avocado oil is not a bad fat, and that one has been tested to be safe at high heat. But
when you say lard, I always think of Crisco, like fat in a can. Is that, we're not talking about that, right?
Well, the traditional lard that your grandparents ate,
right.
Yeah, that your grandma, she would make bacon and pour that fat off and cook with that. That was going on for thousands of years. The GAPS is working with foods that have been used for thousands of years. These were in the Bible. Like the shepherds were using kefir.
So for the last 50 years, everything they've been teaching us is wrong.
Well, I would say there's a lot of
misunderstanding. There's a lot of propaganda. And
well, we all know that because everybody wants to make money, especially the food companies and the drug companies.
And one thing people need to understand is fat it's a cleaner for the body. It actually helps convert protein, so you build your muscle, it builds the bones. All your organs are made out of fat. Your brain's 60% fat, so it needs that nourishment, and we are like a healthy, fat-starved culture.
You need to talk to the doctor I just fired because he thought I needed liquid plumber because I ate too much fat. Unfortunately. But he's gone now, so we don't have to worry about him. Would you say that the digestive system is not well? When it's not well, it becomes a source of toxicity and can cause various autoimmune diseases. Now, aren't these the same diseases that the mainstream medical community has the most trouble diagnosing and treating? And do you think it is because they have only been taught one way, and that's using drugs?
Yes. And if you think about what autoimmunity is, your immune system breaks. Okay? So if your immune system's broken, you can't feed it drugs. And not only that, you can't feed it drugs that actually compromise the digestion even further. So, the reason they have such a difficult time in the allopathic medicine is because they treat symptomatically. And when you're treating an autoimmune symptomatically, you'll go schizophrenia because you have to treat it holistically because you need to restore the immune system. And in the stomach, when Jen was explaining earlier, there's an enterocyte. That's a stomach cell, and it's responsible for 90% of your immunity and communicates with the Th1 and Th2 immunities. So that has to be restored, and to even have a good, healthy probiotic and enzymic-rich GI tract, you have to have that cell because on its antennas is where those probiotics live.
Okay, so we have to get to the root cause of things. And when nobody seems to be getting to the root cause, we just seem to be kind of skirting around the edges with all these symptomatic things with the dogs.
Chasing symptoms.
You know, as both of you know, I just started this GAPS diet. And in fact, last night, you know, I was making this lamb soup with the lamb necks and the lamb shanks, and I had to go out to the farm and pick up all of this meat. And I've never done this before. It was a very interesting journey for me. So could you tell our audience why it is important to use these particular parts of the lamb or other animals, and why these animals need to be grass-fed?
Absolutely, yeah. When I guide someone, I actually have met all the farmers, and I know specifically where the meats are from. That's really important to me, because an animal that's been grass-raised, grass-finished, the nutrition in that meat is totally different than an animal that's pasture-raised and grain finished or just raised in a feedlot. So, for example, the farmer that you bought your lamb from, you know, she's independent. She just raises her own lamb. She takes great care of them, and we know that that's going to be quality meat. There's going to be a lot of nutrition in that, the right kind of fats. It's not going to have antibiotics. It's not going to have steroids and different things that we don't want. And the reason why, for example, I had you get lamb necks is because they produce the best flavor in the stock. So this is an intensive protocol, but I'm also about flavor, and I love food. I'm a foodie. So anything I write recipe-wise is going to produce, I want it to be good, to taste good. And that's important.
We're going to have to take a quick break, but we want to get back to this food story. We'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Health Conclusions, brought to you by Altrua Health Share with your host, Bob Neugebauer, on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Health Conclusions on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. We're speaking with Jennifer Whitney and John Knutson about leaky gut and the GAPS diet, sponsored by AltruaHealthShare.org. All right, so we were talking about the sourcing of the foods and how important it is to have that organic makeup in these foods and not to have any pesticides or any other toxicity in them. How did you find all of these people? How did you assemble them and put them together? Did the two of you work on this together, or was it just by happenstance?
Well, I just love to go to the farmer's market, and honestly, this is a passion of mine. If I wasn't doing this for a career, I'd be doing this on my own. I love food. I love to cook, and so it's just, I go down to the farmer's market almost every week, and I meet the farmers, and I interview them kind of, and I ask them about how they raise their animals, because I do want the top quality. And then what I do is kind of assess and figure out what cuts I can get that are affordable, and we'll have the bone marrow in some of the cuts and then produce a good flavor. So there's kind of an art to it. And once I break that down, then I can create a recipe and guide clients so they actually feel like they can do it. Because usually I am guiding clients that honestly don't cook at all. Like, they're used to using food only warmed up, you know, let's put it in plastic, warm it up in the microwave, open up a can or a box. I mean, and I'm putting them on a protocol where we're literally cooking from scratch. So I try to guide them so specifically that they're like, okay, I can do this. You know, I just get a hold of this farmer, I get these cuts, I put this amount in this pot, and I cook it. So it's not overwhelming, you know.
Well, how do you find it when you have somebody who has a limited budget? How do they deal with the cost factor? Because I know this organic food is not cheap. By the same token, if you buy it right, it's not terribly expensive either, but you're getting much better quality. But how do they deal with that?
Well, a lot of times they're not spending the money on the food that they were buying, and so it really kind of, it evens out. And then most of these broths can be made with very affordable cuts. Like, for example, with lamb stock, you can get 4 lamb necks for $4, and those produce an amazing flavor. The lamb shank, which is really,
I don't know where you shopped the other day. I didn't pay $4 for them.
Anyway, you can get a lot. 4 quarts, for example, if you're making chicken stock or lamb stock, you know, and it's not too expensive, you know, and then you're going to make a soup out of it, and you're going to be eating that for, you know, a couple of days, but you're not going to be buying the other food you were buying. You know, I mean, eating out in itself is really expensive. People on the GAPS generally don't eat out. They're usually ordering from John, and that's what they're doing if they eat out, or they're making their own food. And so I think it kind of evens out.
Well, if you look at it, like, the average American spends $30 to $60 a day on their food supply. So what I've learned,
wow, they must be very fat. I don't spend that.
Well, so I would say, if you're under the 30 mark, you got to search out quality food, because it is so important. And you can look at it like this: you can eat crappy and get conditions and pay out later down the road a lot more money, because the average autoimmune disorder gets up anywhere from $50,000 to $1 million for a person trying to heal it. It doesn't have to be like that, but that's the way our system's set up, because they go to the wrong people and, to heal the autoimmune disorder.
So tell me, how do you prepare these broths from scratch, and what are the different phases for our audience so they can understand how they would go through something like this? And then I want to get to the point, do you actually teach classes on some of this?
Yes, I will be. I'm 2 years into this business, and right now I'm a one-man show. So I'm the phone answerer, the cook, the deliverer. I do it all.
And the night watchman, we understand.
Yeah, and the night watchman. But, the goal is that I'm going to be out in public teaching people my cooking techniques, because I want to bring cooking back into the home. Right now, we have given our power away to a propaganda machine, to companies telling us what's healthy and not healthy, and we've gotten away from common sense, and we need to get back to nature. And so the process I go about in cooking my food is, first, I know the farms where my food's coming from.
And do you go to the farms themselves, or do you go to the farmer's market?
I go and meet the farmers, the butchers. Being a small business, the infrastructure is not set up for me, so I am trying to create the infrastructure. And it's basically, creating a community of people, of like-minded people that are all on the same page and working like a team. So I work with the farmers, the butchers, the distributors, everything. And I'm trying to build an infrastructure to where we can get quality food to people.
So how do you start one of your broths? What do you do?
It's kind of like being a surgeon. First, I get a quality water that's been restructured.
Water. Hold on one second on water. Just kind of curious. When you say structured water, explain to our audience what you mean by that, because I don't think most people understand the water from their tap is not structured. In fact, in many cases, it's toxic.
Yeah, right now, the whole water system needs to change, and people need to get educated. And if you've seen pictures like I have from tap water in jars from Eagle, Meridian, Boise, after 24 hours, there's all kinds of growth in it that would just shock you. But so when I say restructured water, a spring water would be a structured water. It's coming up from the earth, and it has all kinds of vibrancy, and it's living. And so basically I have to get a pure water and then restructure it and remineralize it, just kind of like what I'm doing with the food. And then I use color therapy and the sun to recharge it, and I use a thing called M-Water that helps restructure the water. So I try to get the water as vibrant and alive, so it helps the food absorb, helps all kinds of things absorb in your system, and your system's absorbing the water, because that's something else people don't talk about. When you're drinking a sterile, dead water, your body's not retaining much. It's basically just going through you and out.
So the key to the good broth is actually the water.
That's the first step, yeah.
Well, let's go on with the next step, because I'd use filtered water in my house, but it's an RO filter, which means they demineralize it because they take everything out of it. So,
yeah.
And how do you remineralize water?
I use a guy named Bill at All About the Water, and he has a remineralization system. And, all the things I'm talking about, I help my clientele get plugged into, because it's about resources. As you experience, you went to go get the neck bones, you never done it before, and it seemed like an overwhelming process. But wouldn't it be nice to have somebody like me that can just tell you where to go and get the best deals? And not only that, if I know you're drinking from tap water, set you up with bill all about the water to come in and actually put a filtration system into your home that will do the same thing that I'm doing
Sure.
in my kitchen.
Sure. So tell me, go on with your broth. You got the structured water.
Yeah,
now
so
where do you go?
the next thing is getting quality shanks and meaty bones. You want the meaty bones, not bony bones. You do a little bony bones, but bony bones is what you use to make a broth. And I'm making a stock, and this is the hugest confusion in the gaps, is people go on broths, and when you have an autoimmune disorder, it's the worst thing you can go on.
Is a broth?
It is a broth.
So you're doing a stock.
What is it, glutathione?
Yeah, it's bone marrow broth is high in glutamic acid,
Glutamic
which
acid,
works,
yeah.
works like MSG, and it can further irritate if there's any type of inflammation in the gut.
Yeah, so that can go through the leaky gut and then cause all kinds of tics and even seizures, and keep the body from building, which is the most important thing at the gaps, because the body is so weak that it needs to build up that it can't even take any other like medicine or modalities. It needs to build up so it can accept that stuff to heal. So yeah, I get quality meaty bones and I make a stock, and stocks are different cooking times. And out of that stock, you get healthy fat that leaches in to the water. And then you start using your seasonings like pink Himalayan sea salt and quality ingredients. From step one with the water all the way to the finished product, you're building an organic, quality, non-toxic, free stocks / soup or tonic.
So you actually go down to the farmer's market every week and you pick up your foods, or even during the week?
No, I'm actually connected with a butcher, Meats Royale off of Overland, and they get me all my quality, free-range, grass-fed meats. I work with them intimately to make sure that I'm getting the highest quality organic stuff.
Okay.
And I'll send clientele there because they actually have great deals versus going to the co-op or Whole Foods where,
Yeah, I know about the co-op and
Whole Foods
Been there,
you can
done
get
that.
4 bones and you're paying $15.
Yes, I do understand that. We're going to have to take a quick break here. We'll be back in a few minutes. You're listening to Health Conclusions, brought to you by Altrua Health Share, with your host Bob Nugabar on 580 KIDO AM and 107.5 FM. Welcome back to Healthy Conclusions on 580 KIDO. We're speaking with Jennifer Whitney, who is a nutritionist here in town, and John Knutson, who happens to be an organic cook. All right, so we've talked about the sourcing of the foods. We've talked about where we can get the foods. We know it's at the farmer's market. By the way, where is this farmer's market that you guys get all this food?
Well, the best one is down in the parking lot right by Chandler's. There's a really big one, which is the Capital City Market. And then I think the best farmers, they just branched off and kind of formed their own. And it's just in one parking lot, which is right across the street from, where Chandler's is. But now they've gone indoors, so they're in a building behind the Boise Library. So there's a year-round farmer's market going. So
Wow.
that's pretty exciting.
Well, you're going to have to show me around there one of these days.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm sure if I have you with me, it's going to be a lot cheaper.
And also with people that Jen feed me, I plug them into butcher markets and show them where they can go all around the valley to get the best deals.
I'm just curious, did either of you ever think that these are the careers that you would wind up in to help people recover from these autoimmune diseases through proper nutrition?
No.
Yeah, no, pretty early on in my nutrition practice, I just realized that people were a lot sicker than I ever expected once I actually started to see them clinically. And I started to pretty early on work with fermented foods without knowing about the GAPS diet. I just started to work with water kefir and sauerkraut and just noticed a huge difference. They would start to get better pretty quickly, and these foods were really cheap and affordable for them to make or buy. And so that led me into discovering the book, Gut and Psychology Syndrome. And when I read that, I honestly just knew right then and there that was the secret. That was it. That was the core that I had to go and get certified in and start to run, because everything else was just kind of touching the surface. And so that was like 5 years ago. And once I went and got trained, I just knew that this was going to be a big thing.
So that book that you gave me to read was your epiphany, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, because if there's one book that you read in this field of nutrition, that is, it has so much amazing information in it.
Well, I'm a voracious reader, so I'll probably finish this one in the next few days. What about you, John? Did you ever think you were going to be doing what you're doing?
No, not at all. I mean, yes, I was interested in health and healing fields, but I was on a very different path, and I think I had to start thinking outside the box. Like I said, I got my own autoimmune disorder, and my dad got cancer, and my dad was written off by the medical community, and so it just kind of threw me in this launching pad to where I had the epiphanies that food needs to be made the medicine, and we need to try different routes. And I did, and my dad only was given a few weeks to live. It's 7 years later. I have reversed the autoimmune that I was struggling with, and out of that was a lot of epiphanies and has led me into what I'm doing, because I saw that no one was doing it and that people need this more than anything at this point in time.
Yeah,
Well,
and
go ahead.
I was just going to say the biggest thing too is one of the biggest things people struggle with is cooking it. So when John got into the GAPS, one of the things he noticed, because I'd been already in practice for a couple years, is that one of the biggest struggles my clients were having was cooking all of it, because most people that start the GAPS are really sick. And so that's when he's like, I'm going to focus on making this, and then I'm going to focus on the clinical end of it. And that's how we started to work together, because it really does help. I mean, especially in the first part of the GAPS, if I can guide them, and then I just tell them, you can order most of this from John. The rest of it you can buy, or I can teach them to make the kefir, the yogurt. It's not so overwhelming. So about probably 80% of my clients use John now. And it is very helpful because he delivers once a week.
And there's people, we've taken people that are bedridden in homes, can't cook the food, to where they're healthy now and they're cooking on their own. So I'm just saying I deliver to a lot of people that wouldn't be able to cook the food, or people who are so busy, they have careers or whatever, but they need to function and they don't have that time to put in. But like I said, the heart of my business is I want to help people get cooking back into the home, because for us to empower ourselves as people, we're going to have to start learning to cook from scratch again and get away from all this processed stuff and using processed ingredients that lead to our sickness and more money in the long run.
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is get the farmers to stop growing this GMO stuff that they've been doing and these genetically modified grains that they've been growing, because I think they have been the most deadly things that we've had, especially with all the pesticides that they've been throwing on them. The more you read about this, the more you have to question how the FDA allows this to happen and how they allow them to use these, excuse me, without little or no concern for the general public and what's going to happen in the future. And as we've seen over the years, there are so many different products that have come out that we think are okay and good for us, and all of a sudden, 20, 30 years later, we find people dying, and they're dying from things that we thought were good.
Yes.
So maybe we need a little bit more testing and a little bit more or less hanky-panky in the government halls of so-called justice, or how they decide what they're going to do with us. I mean, they basically dictate what our food supply looks like when you look at it.
Yes, and they're dictating to the farmers too. That's what no one realizes. They convince the farmers through their own economic systems and the kickbacks that they give them. And not only that, they have their own scientists that come in and convince the farmers of why they should do it this way.
I know you both deal with patients of naturopathic doctors, but do you ever get a call from the regular MDs to use your service? And do you get a lot of flack from the mainstream medical community about your services?
I haven't actually. Quite honestly, I get referrals now from probably about 8 doctors, and actually a handful of those are medical doctors. And part of it is because they're overwhelmed. They're getting so many people coming in with sicknesses and autoimmune, things they've never seen before, major digestive disorders that they are seeing. I mean, a true good doctor, and there are a lot of good doctors out there, are seeing that we have an epidemic going on. And if they know anything about the GAPS, if they've read the book or they understand leaky gut, and there's a lot more information out now about leaky gut, they usually will refer their client to me, and that client will be working with them on other things. But if they refer in as well with the gaps, then we start to work like a team, and it just helps that this client benefit more from their service. So it's a blend of functional medicine doctors, medical doctors, naturopaths. I mean, there's a lot of people questioning what's going on. I mean, there's younger and younger kids being diagnosed with autism, obesity, diabetes, autoimmune, things that weren't happening in the past. I mean, this is the first generation that may not outlive, the adults right now because of all the processed foods. So I do think there is a lot of awareness that is going on. I do see that. And there is honestly good MDs and good natural doctors that are seeking help, and wanting to have sort of a specialist. That's what I am, basically. This is kind of all I do, is truly help people to heal their gut. I mean, it's a big part of my practice.
And one thing that we have helped a lot of people with is, if they're coming out of surgery, if they do have to be on pain meds, if for some reason it's a last resort and they do have to have antibiotics, the best thing you can do if you're doing any of that is to do the gaps, because then it will help protect against the side effects of the pain meds. It will help against the side effects of the damaging of the stomach lining. So even to allopathic medicine, we can be very valuable. And I wish all doctors knew the nutrition that we knew, because when they are putting their patients on these things, they could help prevent a domino spiral downward effect that happens from the side effects of taking all those medications for months or
unfortunately, most allopathic doctors only get 19 and a half hours of nutritional education when they go through medical school. The rest of it's all about drugs. I'd like to get both of you to do a little something for our website. We'll get you both up on a website so that people know who to contact, how to contact them. And I'd like to get you to write a little something about one of your recipes so we could put that up there also in one of our articles. I think that might be very interesting. As far as having you two on, I think it was fantastic. I think a lot of people need to know about these differences in the approaches to getting healthy. So I want to thank you both for coming here tonight. It was an interesting session.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm looking forward to maybe having you on again. This is Bob Neugebauer signing off for Health Conclusions. We hope you will join us again, same time next Sunday, for another hour of informative talk on nutrition, exercise, and alternative medicine options, sponsored by AltruaHealthShare.org at 580 KIDOAM and 107.5 FM.